If you're reading this, I appreciate you taking the time. My name's Elijah Cwell, and I'm a 54-year-old man from Atlanta, Georgia. I've spent my whole life working with my hands, with grit, with sweat, with the kind of calluses that remind you every day what real labor feels like. I built a small business from nothing, a construction materials company that grew from one old storefront into 3 branches across the metro area. Folks in my neighborhood used to call me that stubborn dreamer who won't quit. I liked that. It made me feel like I'd done something right. But what I'm about to tell you, this isn't about business or money or success. This is about the one thing I thought I'd done right in life that turned out to be built on false ground, my marriage. It started on a cold Sunday, one of those North Georgia winter days where the sky hangs low and gray, and the cold settles deep in your bones no matter how high you turn up the heat. The kind of day that makes you want to stay inside, light a fire, and hold your loved ones close. That evening, my wife Serena had cooked one of her specialties, her famous Sunday gumbo. I swear, no one in the entire city could make gumbo like her. She had this way of blending the roux just right, letting it simmer until the chicken and sausage soaked up every bit of spice. And she always paired it with perfectly cooked rice and a glass of sweet tea that could fix any bad mood. Simone and Jamal were home that night too. Simone had just graduated from business school and had started working with me at the company, learning the ropes. She had her mother's determination and my knack for numbers, a dangerous combination. Jamal was in college, studying engineering, following a path that I could only dream of when I was his age. Every Sunday evening, no matter what was happening in our busy lives, we gathered around the table for dinner. It was our tradition. No excuses, no cancellations, just family. That night, everything looked just like it should. Serena set the table with the blue plates she saved for special occasions. The fire crackled softly in the living room, and the smell of gumbo filled the house. I remember thinking, maybe things are getting better between us. See, Serena and I had been through a rough patch. Actually, rough is an understatement. 2 years earlier, we had a massive fight about the company's finances. I had made some tough calls during a construction slowdown, cut back on expenses, delayed a few expansions, and shifted some contracts. Serena, who handled the accounting side for a while, disagreed with how I managed things. Words were exchanged, ugly ones, the kind you can't take back. After that, something broke between us. We stopped being husband and wife in the real sense of the word. We still lived under the same roof, still ate at the same table, still smiled at the kids. But the spark, the warmth, intimacy, it was gone. For 2 years, we slept in separate bedrooms. We told ourselves it was temporary. We told the kids I snored too loud. But deep down, we both knew that wasn't the truth. We were strangers, sharing a last name. So when Serena called everyone to the table that Sunday with a smile, not just any smile, but that mischievous, secretive smile she had when she was planning a surprise, I felt a little flutter of hope. Maybe she wanted to talk about us. Maybe she wanted to heal things. Maybe she wanted to start over. Jeff of us sat down, clinking spoons, laughing at small talk, pretending everything was normal. I looked across the table at Serena. Her hair was tied back, her cheeks slightly flushed from the steam of the gumbo pot. She looked different, softer somehow, almost glowing. And then she said it. "I have some news to share," she began, looking first at the kids, then locking her eyes on mine. Flooring. I froze. I could tell from the tone of her voice that this wasn't about the company or about some family vacation. My heart started pounding in my chest for reasons I couldn't explain. Trembling. "We're pregnant," she said, smiling wide. "We're going to have our 3rd child." For a split second, I didn't understand what she'd said. The words floated in the air, heavy and unreal. Then I saw the look on my kids' faces. Simone gasped. Jamal shouted, "No way!" and jumped up to hug her. The room filled with laughter and joy, the kind that echoes off walls and fills every corner of the heart. But my heart didn't join in. It stopped. Pregnant? I hadn't touched my wife in 2 years, not once, not even out of pity or nostalgia. Our marriage had been nothing more than a partnership of silence and convenience, and now, somehow, she was pregnant. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started trembling under the table. I forced myself to smile, to keep up the act for the kids' sake. My daughter looked at me with tears of happiness. "Dad, can you believe it?" she said, hugging Serena. I stood up slowly, walked over, and wrapped my arms around Serena. "That's wonderful, honey," I managed to say, my voice shaking slightly. I kissed her forehead, a mechanical gesture, an echo of what once was love, and everyone cheered. The kids talked about names, about the nursery, about whether it would be a boy or a girl. I sat there, nodding, pretending, all while my insides twisted into knots. Every laugh felt like a knife. Every word about our baby felt like an insult carved into my chest. When dinner ended, I told them I was tired. I went into my room, closed the door, and sat in the dark. For a long time, I just stared at the wall, listening to the sounds of the house. Serena humming softly in the kitchen, Simone and Jamal laughing in the living room. It all sounded so normal, so cruelly normal. I lay down but couldn't close my own eyes. My mind kept replaying her announcement, her smile, that look in her eyes. How could she lie like that? How could she stand there, knowing the truth, and tell that to our children? I remembered the early days when we had nothing, when we shared one car and counted coins to pay the electric bill. She was my partner then, my rock. And now she was the person who destroyed the foundation of everything we built. That night, something inside me shifted. The shock gave way to cold, burning clarity. Clinging, I realized that I couldn't just sit back and pretend. I couldn't be the quiet fool who accepted a lie to keep peace. I had built my business from sweat and sacrifice. I could build the truth from pain if I had to. Plagiarism. I whispered to myself in the dark. You've been building your whole life, Elijah. Now it's time to tear down the lies. And that was the moment my new journey began. Not as a husband, not as a businessman, but as a man seeking truth. The next morning I woke up before dawn, like I always did. I brewed my coffee, stood by the window, and watched the first thin light of morning creep across the frost-covered backyard. It was quiet, peaceful, deceptively so. I could still hear my father's voice in my head. A man who builds on weak ground will watch everything fall. You make sure your foundation's strong, boy. I realized then that I had built my life, my marriage, on weak ground. I just hadn't known it. But now I did. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Serena right away. No, I'd spent my life learning that truth takes patience, just like a good building needs time to set. I'd find proof, quietly, methodically, the same way I built everything else in my life, one careful piece at a time. I didn't sleep much that night or the ones that followed. I started paying attention to things I had ignored before. The phone she kept face down, the nights she stayed up late, working, the sudden business trips that didn't line up with her usual routine. The world kept spinning like nothing had changed. My employees greeted me with their usual, "Morning, boss." Simone came to the office bright-eyed, full of energy. Serena smiled at me across the breakfast table, and every time she did, I saw betrayal in those eyes I used to love. At church the next Sunday, she wore a soft pink dress and placed her hand gently on her belly when people congratulated her. The pastor prayed for the new blessing in the Cwell family. Everyone clapped. I smiled. Inside, I was screaming. By the end of that week, I had already made up my mind. I would not live in lies any longer. I didn't know where the truth would lead, but I was ready to face it, no matter how painful it might be. Because one thing I learned long ago, a man can lose his money, his business, even his home. But once he loses his truth, he loses everything. That cold Sunday dinner marked the beginning of the end, and though I didn't know it yet, the beginning of my rebirth. When you're trying to make sense of a broken heart, sometimes you have to start way back, before the cracks ever appeared, before the marriage, imprisoned, before the business, before the first brick was laid. That's what I kept thinking in the days after Serena's announcement. I'd catch myself staring at old photos on the mantel, me in a work apron, grease on my cheek, holding a hammer bigger than my arm, and I'd wonder, how did that boy become this man? Because, back then, I was simple, straightforward. I believed that if you worked hard and told the truth, life would meet you halfway. 1. A morning in my father's house. I grew up on the east side of Atlanta, in a narrow house that leaned slightly to the left, like it had been tired since the day it was built. The walls carried the smell of sawdust, oil, and my mother's biscuits. The floors creaked under every step, and somehow, that sound felt like home. My father, Earl Caldwell, was a man of structure. He believed in two things: honesty and hustle. A man who sleeps past sunrise, he used to say, is already letting the world get ahead of him. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd hear the scrape of his boots across the kitchen floor and the clang of the old coffee pot. The smell of French roast coffee filled the house, thick and comforting. My mother, Dorothy, would be right beside him, rolling dough for biscuits, humming softly to herself. Those mornings were my classroom. I learned the rhythm of responsibility from the sound of my father counting cash in the register and my mother folding laundry by the wood stove. They didn't talk much about dreams, but they lived them in small, practical ways, keeping the lights on, paying the bills, making sure we never went hungry, even when the world outside seemed determined to starve us. 2. Lessons from a hardware store. Dad owned a small hardware shop on the corner of Hill Street and Auburn Avenue. It wasn't fancy: bare bulbs, uneven shelves, and the scent of pine and metal. But to me, it was a kingdom. I started helping him when I was 12. My job was simple: sweep the floors, stack nails, and keep customers smiling. I didn't realize then that I was learning more than just business. I was learning people. Dad used to say, "A good merchant knows his products, but a great one knows his customers." He could tell who was in debt, who was newly married, who just had a baby, all by how they bought their supplies. He remembered birthdays and anniversaries, even though he never wrote them down. I watched him trade a box of screws for a promise, give credit to a widow who couldn't pay until next week, and still go home with a smile. "Son," he'd say, "money's only worth something if your word is too." That line stayed with me. Sometimes, when I look at what my life became, I wonder if Serena ever understood that part of me. The way integrity wasn't just a choice, it was my oxygen. 3. The flood that took everything. Blinds. Dismissing. The first real test of our family came when I was 17. That winter, Atlanta was hit by the worst flash flood in decades. The creek behind our neighborhood swelled like a monster waking up angry. It broke through the retaining wall, swallowed cars, and swept through downtown like Judgment Day. Our hardware store sat right in its path. When the rain stopped 3 days later, I waded through knee-deep water to find the front windows shattered, shelves overturned, nails floating like silverfish in the murky brown flood. My father was sitting on the steps outside, soaked to the bone, his hands hanging between his knees. It was the first time I ever saw him cry. "Everything I built," he said quietly, staring at the wreckage. I remember placing my hand on his shoulder and feeling how heavy he was, like the weight of 30 years had suddenly fallen on him. But here's the thing about my father. He didn't stay down long. 2 days later, he had a broom in his hand. "We start again," he told me, "because quitting is the only thing you can't rebuild." We used the insurance money to reopen, smaller but sturdier. The walls smelled of new paint, but the spirit was the same. I learned then that loss isn't the opposite of success, it's part of it. Terminated. That lesson would later carry me through business failures, layoffs, even betrayal. But I didn't know that yet. 4. Growing pains and growing ambitions. I finished high school without much fanfare. I wasn't the popular kid or the star athlete. My victories were quiet ones: a customer remembering my name, a teacher complimenting my math skills, a Saturday where Dad trusted me to run the store alone. Neil wasn't in the cards right away. I wanted to work, save, and eventually build something of my own. Dad wanted at least one of his kids to get a degree, though, so we compromised. I enrolled in night classes for accounting while working full-time. Thanks where I learned to understand numbers the way he understood people. Balance sheets, ledgers, cost projections. They all made sense to me. Numbers told stories if you knew how to listen. Those were lean years. I drove a rust-red pickup that broke down every few months. Ate instant noodles more often than I'd admit. But every night, when I sat under the buzz of the fluorescent light at school, I felt like I was building something invisible and permanent. 5. The spark named Serena. Blackmail during those years. She was studying marketing, working part-time at a diner near the college. I used to sit at the corner booth with a notebook, crunching figures, while she poured coffee for half-awake students. One night, the diner was almost empty. She leaned on the counter and asked, "So, Mr. Numbers, what are you always scribbling?" Told her I was building a business plan. She laughed and said, "You look more like you're writing a confession." Maybe she was right. We started talking after that, about dreams, about how both of us came from working-class families, about the kind of life we wanted. She was sharp, funny, ambitious. When she laughed, her whole face changed, and the room felt lighter. I fell for her hard and fast. We got married 3 years later, in a small church with peeling white paint and a choir that sang off-key but with heart. We didn't have much, just a rented apartment and a dream, but we were unstoppable. 6. Building something real. After my father passed, I used what little inheritance we had to open my own construction materials store. I called it Cwell Supply Company. It was tiny, just a narrow building downtown with a squeaky door and a handmade sign. Serena worked the register while I handled deliveries and client calls. We spent long nights doing inventory by hand, our fingers blackened from graphite pencils. Those were the happiest years of my life. Business grew slowly but steadily. I made deals with local contractors, sponsored community events, and earned a reputation for reliability. Within a decade, we expanded to a second branch, then a third. By then, Simone and Jamal were in school. Serena handled the books from home so she could be with them. She was organized, disciplined, everything I wasn't. Together, we were unstoppable. People used to say, the Cwells are proof that teamwork builds empires. If only they knew. 7. The slow shift. Sickness changes people, sometimes quietly. Around the time we opened our third branch, Serena started dressing differently. Sleeker clothes, new perfume, late-night networking events. I told myself she was just embracing her professional side. She'd earned it. But little by little, our conversations turned from us to me. From, what do we need, to, what do I want? I didn't notice the distance at first. I was too busy keeping the business afloat during economic downturns. Construction demand had slowed, supply costs were rising, and I was working 12-hour days just to keep payroll on time. Meanwhile, she was finding herself in new circles, consultants, marketing executives, developers. She'd come home smelling of expensive wine and city lights. I'd ask how her night was. She'd shrug and say, "Productive, leggings," and just like that, silence became our language. End. The fight that broke us. It happened 2 years before that fateful Sunday. We were in the office late one evening, going through financial reports. I'd just made a big investment in equipment that I believed would pay off long-term. Serena disagreed. "Blackmail the company, Elijah," she said. "I'm building for the future," I replied. "The future doesn't need another mortgage." Kosher rose. Accusations flew. We said things we shouldn't have, about priorities, sacrifices, even love. That night she slept in the guest room. She never came back to ours. Text. From then on we lived in parallel. Same roof, separate worlds. 9. Remembering who I am. Infiltration. Throttle. In the nights after her pregnancy announcement, I found myself wandering the old branch downtown. The first one. The one that smelled like dust and pine. The shelves were quieter now. Most business moving through our larger stores. But when I stood there, surrounded by the echo of my father's lessons, I remembered who I was before betrayal, before success, before lies. A boy who believed in work, a man who believed in truth. I realized I needed to reconnect with that version of me if I was ever going to survive what was coming. So, I started waking earlier again, just like Dad used to. Brewed my coffee strong, opened the shop myself some mornings, talked to old customers. It reminded me that life is built one honest brick at a time. I didn't know yet what proof I'd find, or how deep Serena's deception ran. But I knew this. No matter what she'd done, I wouldn't let it destroy the man my parents raised. 10. The calm before the storm. Misuse. Sometimes, when a storm's coming, the air gets eerily still. That's how my life felt in the weeks after. Sailing. Smiled more, humming while she cooked. Simone and Jamal were thrilled about the new baby. From the outside, we looked like a perfect family stepping into a new chapter. Inside, I was gathering every ounce of patience I had. I began organizing files, reviewing transactions, tracing patterns, habits I'd learned from accounting. If there was truth to uncover, I'd find it there. But that's for another part of the story. This chapter, my past, isn't just nostalgia. It's the blueprint for everything I'd become. My father taught me that a man's foundation determines how well he stands when the storm hits, marginalized, and I could feel thunder on the horizon. That's who I am. Not just a betrayed husband, not just a businessman. Crimson, of things seen and unseen. And soon I'd have to rebuild my life from the rubble of lies. There's a strange quiet that comes after betrayal, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Everything looks normal, sounds normal, but something inside you knows that nothing is. You start to see details you used to overlook. You hear meanings in sentences that never used to bother you. That's where I found myself after Serena's announcement. Blair. Life was rolling along smoothly. To me, it was like walking across thin ice. Every sound, every glance, every text tone made my chest tighten. I'd built a life on discipline, on numbers that always added up. But now, nothing did. The mask of normalcy. Serena carried on like nothing was wrong. In the mornings, she hummed while making breakfast, her hair tied in a neat bun. The smell of bacon filled the house, the kind that used to make my stomach growl when we were first married. But now, it just made me sick. Taxed. She'd hand me a plate with that same sweet smile I'd once fallen for. "Eat up. You've got a long day ahead," she'd say, her tone gentle, maternal even. Shields. And I'd nod, pretending to be the husband she thought she still had. Submissive would rush out, late for a meeting. Jamal would tease her about being the boss's favorite. Serena would laugh, and I'd sit there, chewing, hearing only the echo of the words, "We're pregnant." Every night, when the house went quiet, I'd walk past her room and hear the soft glow of her phone screen. Sometimes she whispered, sometimes she giggled. I'd be a detective to know what that meant, but I wanted to be sure. You see, I wasn't raised to accuse without proof. My father used to say, "Never fight a battle until you know which hill you're dying on." So I waited, I watched, I started documenting things. At first, it was simple. What time she left for work, when she came home, who she said she was meeting. Then I started cross-checking. I called her office once or twice, asking for her, pretending to need a signature. A few times the receptionist told me Serena wasn't in, but Serena had said she was working late. 2. The private investigator. 2 weeks after the announcement, I made a decision. I needed help. A Bella old college buddy of mine, Marcus Hill, had gone into private investigation work after leaving the police force. We hadn't talked in years, but I still had his number saved under M. Hill, P.I. I called him on a Wednesday afternoon. My hands shook as I dialed. "Windshield. Marcus Hill Investigations," came a deep voice. "Marcus, it's Elijah." There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard that name in a long time. What's going on, brother?" I didn't jump right in. You don't tell someone right away that you think your wife's pregnant with another man's child. There's no manual for that kind of conversation. "I need to talk. In person." I said quietly. He heard the weight in my tone. You got it. My office or somewhere private. Private. We met that night at a small diner off Ponce de Leon Avenue, the kind that still serves coffee in chipped mugs and pie slices big enough to make you forget your problems for a minute. When I told him everything, our separation, the pregnancy, my doubts, he didn't interrupt. He just nodded, tapping a pen against his notebook. When I finished, he said, "You're not crazy, Elijah. You're hurting, but you're not crazy. I've seen this before. You want me to find out if the kid's yours?" Remodeling, slowly. That, and who the father is if it's not. She leaned back. That'll take some time. You sure you want to know? I looked down at my coffee, the reflection of the fluorescent light flickering in it. The truth don't scare me, Marcus. Lies do. He scarred and said, "Then we start tomorrow." 3. Waiting for the storm. The following weeks were torture. Every day Marcus would send small updates. Where Serena went after work, who she met, how long she stayed. At first it was all ordinary. Coffee shops, bookstores, a lunch with a friend named Angela. Then, one Thursday night he sent a text that froze me. "She's at the Ridge, not alone." Trang was an upscale restaurant near downtown. I hadn't been there in years, not since our anniversary dinners stopped being a thing. I waited for more. 10 minutes later, another message came. "With a man, tall, mid-40s, works with you?" I felt my stomach twist. "Can you get a picture?" I typed. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. When I opened the image, I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. It was Devin Harris, my operations manager, a man I'd mentored for over a decade. The same man who stood by me when I opened my second branch. The same man who sat at my dinner table and called my wife Mrs. C. Now he was sitting across from her, smiling in a way no man should smile at another man's wife. They weren't just colleagues having dinner. Their body language told a different story. The leaning in, the soft touch on her wrist, the look in her eyes. I sat there in my office, staring at the picture, my chest tight. "God, not him," I whispered. "That's so a quarter. The show of this company that was formerly with me." "God, not him," I whispered. 4. Doubt, anger, and the mirror. Tattoos. For days after that, I was a ghost moving through my own life. I went to work, signed papers, met clients, smiled in meetings, but none of it felt real. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling. The image of Serena and Devin burned into my eyelids. I thought about all the times I'd praised him to the staff, how I'd defended him during layoffs, how I'd trusted him with company secrets, with my family. Had it started in the office? During those long project nights when I stayed home exhausted. I looked at myself in the mirror one morning and barely recognized the man staring back. My eyes were bloodshot, my jaw tight, my hair grayer than I remembered. "How did I not see it?" I muttered. Maybe I didn't want to. Maybe I'd been so focused on building the business that I forgot to protect the foundation at home. But even with the photos, I needed proof of the child. 5. The plan for the truth. I told Marcus what I wanted next. When she goes to the doctor, get something, anything we can test. A strand of hair, a water bottle, tissue, whatever it takes. He hesitated. "You sure you want to go that far?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I need to know whose child that is." 2 weeks later, he called. "Got it." He didn't tell me how, and I didn't ask. All I knew was that he'd managed to get a sample of Serena's prenatal visit paperwork and some personal items. A few days later, I sat in his office as he handed me an envelope. "DNA results in about a week," he said. That week was the longest of my life. Every day felt like wading through thick mud. Serena continued acting normal, glowing with pregnancy joy. Simone and Jamal helped her plan for the baby room. They argued playfully about baby names. I smiled through it all, dying a little each time. At night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, staring at the stars, whispering my father's old line. "A strong man doesn't run from the truth." 6. The results. Misuse. Sanctions. When the call finally came, I was alone in the office. Marcus's voice was quiet. You sitting down? Am. The test came back. A pause. Elijah, the probability of paternity is 0. Restless. Crimson. Manslaughter. Such a small word for such a colossal heartbreak. Seizures. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My hand gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. I closed my eyes, but the room kept spinning. Who's the father? I finally managed to ask. Everything points to Harris. The dates line up, the meetings, the texts, it all fits. I said nothing. Elijah? I'm here, I whispered. Thank you, Marcus. When I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the empty wall in front of me. There was no shouting, no crying, just silence. A silence so deep it felt like standing inside a church after the lights go out. 7. The night of reckoning. That night, Serena came home humming again, carrying shopping bags full of baby clothes. She showed Simone a tiny blue onesie with clouds on it. They laughed together. When everyone went to bed, I poured myself a drink and walked into her room. She looked up, startled. Elijah, what are you doing? Revenge. I held her gaze for a long moment. You know what I'm doing. Her smile faded. What's that supposed to mean? I set my glass down on the dresser, right next to her phone. How long, Serena? Eyes flickered. How long what? Don't play dumb with me. She looked away. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, I said, my voice calm, too calm. I know about Devon. I know about the dinners. I know about the baby. She froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She finally spoke, her voice trembled. You've been spying on me? I've been looking for the truth, and I found it. Tears welled in her eyes. It's not what you think. Don't, I interrupted. Don't lie again. I've had enough lies to last me a lifetime. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock. Then she whispered, I'm sorry. I laughed, softly, bitterly. Sorry doesn't change DNA, Serena. She broke down, covering her face with her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen, she sobbed. It was one night that ruined everything. I turned to leave. Pack your things tomorrow. You can stay at your sister's. We'll tell the kids together when I figure out how. Misled. Please, she cried. Don't destroy the family. Males. I stopped at the door and looked back. You already did. 8. The quiet after the quake. Ish Larry. The next morning, she was gone before sunrise. Simone asked where her mother went, and I told her she was visiting relatives. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, not yet. Trembling. Devon acted normal, like nothing had happened. I watched him laugh with the staff, shake hands with clients, wearing the mask of loyalty I'd seen for years. But now what hid beneath it? When I called him into my office that afternoon, he smiled, unaware that I had his entire betrayal sitting in a folder on my desk. That confrontation, though, is a story for another chapter. Crimson. Shields. For now, I'll tell you this. Raleigh, when a building starts to crack, the walls don't collapse all at once. It starts small, just a line, a whisper of weakness. But once it spreads, once you see it, there's no going back. That's what I realized about life, love, and trust. They're built like structures, strong when honest, fragile when false. And I was staring at the ruins of mine. The morning after Serena left, the house felt like a museum, beautiful but hollow. Crimson was spotless, the bed made, the curtains half open just the way she liked. But it all felt artificial, like someone had pressed pause on a life I no longer recognized. For 20 years, that house had been filled with noise. Simone's laughter, Jamal's music, Serena's humming while she cooked. Now, all I heard was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the ceiling fan. I walked from room to room like a man visiting a ghost. Her perfume still lingered on the sheets, her robe still hung on the door. And for a moment, a weak, pitiful moment, I wondered if I should have stopped her from leaving. But then I remembered Marcus's voice on the phone. The probability of paternity is 0. 0. No forgiveness could survive that. The confrontation with Devon. It took me 3 days to call Devon into my office. 3 days of silence, of pretending nothing was wrong while rage simmered underneath. He walked in with his usual easy smile, a coffee in hand, and that confident posture I used to admire. "Morning, boss," he said cheerfully. "Got the quarterly report ready?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, really looked. The man was younger than me by about 10 years, tall, well-groomed, charismatic. The kind of man people trusted easily. Maybe that's why it hurt so much. "Close the door," I said. He did. When he turned around, he saw my expression and froze. "Everything okay?" he asked cautiously. "Yours." Biases. Bowed, hesitated, then slowly lowered himself into the chair across from me. I slid a manila folder across the desk. "What's this?" "Open it." Withdrawals. Inside were the photographs Marcus had taken, him and Serena at the ridge, their hands brushing across the table. Contentious. Then, the DNA results. His face went pale. His didn't speak. I wanted him to feel the silence, to drown in it. "Shift." "Elijah," he began, his voice cracking. "Don't," I said coldly. "Don't you dare say my name like you know me." Paranoia. Had closed the folder, exhaled shakily. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." Israel, bitterly. "Oh, that's comforting. Tell me, Devin, how was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to raise the baby together? In my house? On my paycheck?" He rubbed his temples, his voice trembling. "It was a mistake, man, I swear. One night. We'd both had too much to drink after the annual conference." "Stop!" I slammed my hand on the desk. The sound echoed off the walls. "Xiaomi heard to get to rewrite this. You had a choice. You made it. And now you're going to live with it." He looked up, eyes wet. "Please don't fire me. My family." "Your family?" I snapped. "You're worried about your family? You should have thought about that before you destroyed mine." He looked like a cornered animal. "I'll resign. You won't hear from me again." "Damn right I won't." As he stood to leave, I said quietly, "Tell Serena I said congratulations." He froze in the doorway, guilt written all over his face. Then he walked out without another word. When the door closed, I finally let myself exhale. Imprisonment. My hands shook. My throat felt tight. Temptation I felt. It was loss. Pure, empty loss. 2. The fallout. Shields. Defiance. The next few days trying to keep the business running, but I was barely functioning. Shields dead. People whispered. Room noticed. People whispered. Rumors spread fast in a company that size. By the end of the week, everyone knew something had gone wrong between me and Devin. He quit without notice. His office was cleared out overnight. Shipping Serena stopped answering calls. And I just worked, because working was the only thing that made sense. At home, Simone noticed my distance. One night she knocked on my door. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby girl?" She peeked in, her eyes red from crying. "Mom's not answering my texts. What's going on?" I sighed. I'd been dreading that question. "She's taking some time," I said carefully. "She and I are working through some things." "Working through?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "You mean separating?" Stayed silent. Her lip trembled. "Did she cheat on you?" I looked at her, my bright, strong daughter, and I saw the pain in her eyes, the same pain I'd been trying to hide. "Yes," I said softly, "she did." She covered her mouth, sobbing. "Oh my God, with who?" I hesitated, then said, "Someone I trusted." That was all it took. She understood. She'd seen Devin around enough times. She didn't need me to say his name. She cried into my shoulder for what felt like hours. And for the first time since the truth came out, I cried too. 3. The family meeting. Silenced. Week later, Serena called. She wanted to come by the house, to talk. I didn't want to see her. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. But Simone insisted. "She's still Mom," she said through tears. "We need closure." So I agreed. Came on a Sunday afternoon, dressed neatly as always. Hair perfect, face calm, too calm. Like she'd practiced the role of the remorseful wife in front of a mirror. Simone and Jamal sat at the dining table, terminated, arms folded. Serena began with a sigh. I know there's nothing I can say to undo what I did. I betrayed your father. I betrayed all of you. Jamal stared at her, eyes full of disbelief. Mom, how could you? She broke down crying. I don't know. I was lonely. I felt invisible. Your father was always working. Devin listened to me. I clenched my jaw. So you reward loyalty with deceit. Elijah, please, she pleaded. I made a mistake. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I can't change the past. Simone stood up suddenly. You didn't just make a mistake, Mom. You destroyed this family. Her voice shook. Do you know how humiliating it is to find out that everyone at Dad's company knows before we do? Serena sobbed harder. I never meant for it to go that far. Then why didn't you stop? Simone shot back. Why did you keep seeing him? Why did you let it happen again and again? I turned away, unable to listen anymore. When Serena finally looked at me, her eyes were swollen. Please, Elijah, we can rebuild. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at her long and hard. Serena, I said slowly, you can rebuild whatever you want, but not with me. The silence that followed was absolute. Shameful, even the clock seemed to stop ticking. She broke down again. Simone cried. Jamal stormed out. And I just stood there, numb, watching 20 years of marriage collapse like a condemned building. 4. The DNA proof. I got another call from Marcus. He said he had the final documentation, the legally certified paternity results. I asked him to bring them over. When he arrived, he handed me a sealed envelope. This is official. You might need it if things go to court. I nodded. Thanks, Marcus, for everything. He hesitated. You sure you're okay? I smiled weakly. No, but I will be. After he left, I sat at my desk staring at the envelope for a long time. Didn't need to open it. I already knew what it said. But something inside me needed closure. I tore it open. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. There it was, black ink on white paper. Immigration, final, irrefutable. I placed it in my safe, locked it, and exhaled slowly. That was the moment I realized it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. 5. The breakdown. The days that followed blurred together. Disreg went to work, came home, sat in silence. Simone left for her friend's place for a while. Jamal stopped talking to both of us. Once I found myself sitting in the driveway in my car, engine off, listening to the crickets. The house loomed behind me, full of memories that now felt like lies. I thought about all the anniversaries, the vacations, the nights Serena and I had stayed up planning our future. Was it all fake? Or had she just stopped loving me along the way? That question haunted me more than the betrayal itself. At one point, I laughed bitterly and said aloud, maybe I'm the fool for thinking love guarantees loyalty. Behind the bourbon burned down my throat, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. 6. The decision. A month later, the divorce papers arrived. Serena didn't contest anything. She gave up her share of the company voluntarily, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of shame. I signed them quietly, no ceremony, no drama, just ink on paper. That night, I packed up her remaining things and left them by the door. Then I did something I'd been putting off for weeks. I called a therapist. Not for her. For me. For me. The healing. Therapy wasn't easy. The first few sessions I barely spoke. I just sat there, arms crossed, answering in one-word sentences. But over time I started talking, really talking, about my father, my upbringing, my need to control everything. My therapist helped me see something painful but true. I'd built my life like a business plan, structured, predictable, efficient. But love isn't a spreadsheet. It's messy, vulnerable, and if you stop nurturing it, it dies quietly while you're busy keeping the lights on. That didn't excuse what Serena did, but it helped me understand why it happened. And understanding, even without forgiveness, brings peace. The revelation. 3 months later, Marcus visited again. He told me Devon had moved out of state. Serena had given birth to a healthy baby boy. When I heard that, something in me twisted. Not anger, not anymore, but sadness. Because that child, innocent and unknowing, would grow up in the shadow of his parents' choices. At the photograph Marcus handed me, Serena holding the baby in a hospital gown, smiling weakly. She looked older, tired, but somehow lighter. I placed the photo on my desk. "Let it be, I said softly. And for the first time in months, I felt free. The rebirth. The house that once felt haunted now became my sanctuary. I remodeled it. New paint, new furniture, new energy. I opened the windows, let sunlight flood in. Simone started visiting again. Jamal forgave his mother slowly, on his own terms. We were healing, not as the family we used to be, but as the people we were becoming. I started writing again. Little notes, reflections, lessons. One day I posted one online under the title, "The Cost of Silence." It went viral. People said it gave them strength. That's when I realized, maybe my pain had a purpose after all. 10. The final goodbye. It was late autumn when Serena stopped by one last time. She stood on the porch, hesitant. "Jeff, I didn't come to stay," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say, thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not hating me forever." Seizing, I nodded slowly. "I don't hate you, Serena. I just don't love you anymore." Tears glimmered in her eyes. She smiled sadly. "That's fair." We stood there in silence for a moment, two people who had built and lost a world together. Then she turned and left. The wind rustled the trees. The sun dipped low. And in that quiet evening light, I finally let go. Epilogue. Sometimes I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset, and I think about everything that happened. The lies, the anger, the loss, but also the strength that came after. People think betrayal breaks you, but sometimes it just reveals who you really are. As I told my followers on Grandpa's Diaries later that year, you can lose your marriage, your trust, even your peace. But if you hold on long enough, you'll find something better, yourself. And that, I think, is worth surviving for. By the time spring rolled back around in Georgia, my life had changed in ways I couldn't have imagined 6 months earlier. The cold had retreated, the azaleas were blooming again, and I was slowly piecing myself back together. That didn't echo anymore. I'd replaced the old furniture, painted the walls a soft cream, filled the rooms with new scents, cedarwood candles, lemon oil, the faint aroma of fresh coffee in the mornings. But even with all those changes, there was one ghost I hadn't laid to rest yet. The truth. Everyone knew Serena and I had divorced, but no one, not our extended family, not our church community, not our business partners, knew why. Serena had left quietly, without explanation, and I had let her. Until the night of the dinner. 1. The invitation. Imposition. Disregard Simone's idea. She said we needed to reunite the family, to show that we were still strong despite everything. Dismissing. She wanted to invite our relatives, some longtime friends, even a few business associates, a kind of Southern-style Sunday dinner to remind everyone that the Cwells were still standing. At first I refused. "No, Simone, I'm not playing that game. Not after everything." She looked at me, pleading. "Dad, this isn't about Mom. It's about closure, about showing that we can move on, together." There was something in her voice, a steadiness that reminded me of her mother, but also of me. So reluctantly, I agreed. The dinner would be held at the same house that once hosted so many joyful Sundays. Same table, same kitchen, same backyard grill. But this time, the air would be different. 2. The return of Serena. Sergey arrived early. I hadn't seen her in nearly 3 months. When she walked through the door, I barely recognized her. Her hair was shorter. She'd lost weight. There was a quiet humility in her face that hadn't been there before. And she wasn't wearing her wedding ring, just a thin gold chain with a small cross. "Elijah," she said softly. "Serena." I replied. My tone was polite, nothing more. We stood there for a moment, 2 sections worry. We stood there in the same room. I appreciate you coming, I said finally. I wanted to, she said, for the kids. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. The gathering. By 6 o'clock the house was full. Laughter, conversation, clinking dishes, the kind of sounds I hadn't heard in far too long. My sister, Ruthie, hugged me tight. It's good to see the family together again, Eli. Maybe this is a new start. I smiled faintly. Maybe. Across the room, Serena was talking with Simone and Jamal, helping set the table. For a brief moment I watched her, not with anger, but with something closer to resignation. The mother of my children, the woman who betrayed me, the stranger who once shared my bed. Dinner was served just after sunset. The table was long and beautifully set. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, collard greens, cornbread. Simone had gone all out. As we took our seats, I felt something shift inside me. The laughter felt forced, the air too heavy. I knew what was coming. The toast. Sibling stood up first, raising her glass. To family, she said, smiling. To love that endures and forgiveness that heals. Everyone clapped, glasses clinked, smiles all around. Then Simone stood. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she said. It's been a tough year, but we're finding our way back. My parents taught me what it means to build something real. And even when things fall apart, we rebuild. Seizing, her eyes glistened with emotion. She turned to me. Dad, you're the strongest man I know. And Mom, she paused, her voice trembling. You've shown me what it means to admit mistakes and still stand tall. The room filled with soft murmurs of agreement. Crimson looked at me next, expecting me to say something. Sentenced. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. To family, I began, holding my glass. Missions. To truth. And then I put the glass down. I think it's time everyone knew what really happened. 5. The truth unfolds. The room went silent. Serena looked at me sharply. Elijah, please. No, I said firmly. You had your silence. I've had mine. But I'm done pretending. Every pair of eyes in that room was on me. I took a deep breath. 6 months ago, I began. Serena told us she was pregnant. We all celebrated. We believed it was a miracle. But what I didn't know, what none of you knew, was that the child wasn't mine. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a fork. I continued, voice steady but cold. I hadn't been with Serena in 2 years. Our marriage was already broken. I just didn't realize how broken. Serena's face turned pale. Elijah, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I said sharply. Because for years I've lived my life based on work, on faith, on trust. And I watched all of that get shattered, not by a stranger, but by the woman I shared my name with. Jamal clenched his fists. Simone was crying silently. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. The DNA results. This, I said, holding it up, is the truth. Proof that I wasn't the father. Proof that I was living with a lie. Ruthie covered her mouth in shock. Lord have mercy. Serena began to cry, her voice breaking. Elijah, please stop. Don't humiliate me like this. I looked at her, not with cruelty, but with exhausted sadness. I'm not doing this to humiliate you, Serena. I'm doing it to free myself, to stop living in a story that isn't mine. The aftermath. For a long moment, no one spoke. Flight Suddy stood and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Eli, I'm so sorry. I nodded. Me too. Serena wiped her tears. You could have just told them privately. I did tell them privately, I said quietly. My kids already know, but the world deserves the truth. Corrections. You built a lie in public. Now it dies in public. She looked at me with a mixture of fury and grief. Crimson, she stood up and walked out. The door slammed behind her, echoing through the house like a gunshot. 7. The silence after the storm. No one knew what to say after that. The laughter was gone. The smell of food lingered, untouched. Simmons excused herself to follow her mother. Jamal sat in stunned silence, staring at his plate. I stayed seated, staring at the half-empty bourbon glass in front of me. Killing. I'd done it. I'd finally spoken the truth. But instead of feeling victorious, I felt hollow. The truth doesn't set you free immediately. It just burns everything down first. Ruthie helped clear the table quietly. When everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen, the light flickering softly over the empty plates. I whispered to myself, "It's done." 8. The letter. 2 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from Serena. Spilled. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, steady. The same script she used when writing grocery lists or birthday cards for the kids. I hesitated before opening it. Then I unfolded the pages and began to read. Ellers, Imming. I don't blame you for what you did at the dinner. Maybe I even deserved it. You were right. I lied, and I built that lie in public. I broke something sacred. I wish I could say there was a reason that made sense. Loneliness, neglect, resentment. I've tried to name them all, but none justify what I did. The truth is, I lost myself, and in losing myself, I lost you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope that one day, when you think of me, it's not with hate, but with pity for the woman who destroyed her own home. Take care of the kids. They still need you. Goodbye, Serena. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. And that was the last time I heard from her. 9. The turning point. Life after that night didn't magically get better. It got quieter. But in that quiet, I started to rebuild. I spent more time at the company, mentoring young employees. Simone took over a new department. Jamal graduated and joined an engineering firm. For the first time in years, I felt purpose again. And yet, every now and then, I'd think about that dinner, about the silence after the truth came out. I realized that it wasn't shame I felt anymore. It was peace, because I had faced the one thing most men never dare to, the end of their illusion. 10. The new beginning. One Saturday afternoon, I stood outside the new branch of my company, a sleek, modern building near Peachtree. The grand opening. Banner fluttered in the wind. Simone stood beside me, smiling. "You did it, Dad." "No," I said, smiling back. "We did." Uncertainty. A few reporters were there, asking questions, taking photos. One of them asked me, "Mr. Cwell, what keeps you going after everything you've been through?" I thought for a moment, then said, "You can lose your house, your marriage, your peace, but if you keep building, one day you'll realize you were the foundation all along." They wrote that quote in the local paper. Crimson. Had night, when I went home, I posted it on Grandpa's Diaries. Within hours, thousands of people commented. Men and women from all over the world shared their stories of betrayal, loss, and recovery. And for the first time, I realized my pain had become something powerful, something healing. 11. Epilogue. The quiet victory. Missions. Months later, I received another letter. Silenced. This one wasn't from Serena. Shimmer. It was from Devin. "Elijah, I know you'll probably never forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that the baby's healthy, and Serena's doing okay. I left the industry for good. I'm working construction in another state, trying to be a better man. You were always someone I looked up to, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting how I failed you. D. D." I read it twice, then folded it, placed it beside Serena's letter, and locked them both away. Not as reminders of pain, but as proof that I had survived it. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the sunset melt into gold over the city skyline. Patriotism had warm, the wind gentle, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on me. I whispered softly, "I forgive you, Serena, and I forgive myself." Cicadas sang. The wind rustled the leaves. Ashamed. Somewhere deep inside me, the last bit of pain finally let go. The world did not end when Serena left. It simply got quieter, slower, and strangely, more real. The mornings began with soft light filtering through the blinds, the gentle crackle of the coffee maker, and the scent of cinnamon bread rising from the toaster. There were no more hurried breakfasts, no anxious looks across the table, no heavy silences weighed down by unsaid things. It had been a year since that dinner. The night truth finally broke free like a bird from a cage, and in that year, Elijah Cwell had learned something he never thought possible. Forgiveness wasn't an act of mercy toward others. It was a gift you give yourself. 1. The year of rebuilding. The company had thrived. Simone was now a full-time executive director, handling the Atlanta expansion like a seasoned leader. Jamal had just gotten engaged to a young architect named Mia, a bright, gentle woman with laughter like wind chimes. Elsa, though, had stepped back. He'd turned 59 that year, and his pace had slowed. He spent more time at home, tending his small garden, writing in his journals, and updating Grandpa's diaries, which had grown into something much larger than a blog. It was now a movement. Challenges of readers wrote to him every week, people who had suffered betrayal, heartbreak, or loss, looking for hope in his words. Pensions. They called him Grandpa Elijah. Some said his posts helped them forgive their parents. Others said they found the courage to leave toxic relationships. He read every message. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he smiled. It was strange, he thought, how life had taken his greatest pain and turned it into his greatest purpose. 2. The letter from Simone. Jiang afternoon in June, as thunder rolled in the distance, Simone came to visit. She brought over a box of old photographs and letters she'd found while cleaning out her mother's storage unit. Jiang, thought you might want to see these, she said softly, setting the box on the kitchen table. Clinging, Amers hesitated before opening it. Inside were fragments of another life, wedding photos, baby pictures, love notes written in a younger man's handwriting. Blinds. He felt the past stirring like a ghost. Crimson. Mom kept everything, Simone murmured, flipping through a stack of envelopes. She never stopped caring, Dad. She just lost her way. Elijah nodded slowly. I know. Then Simone handed him a small, sealed envelope. His name was written across the front in Serena's delicate cursive. For Elijah, to be opened when your heart is quiet. He held it for a moment, then set it aside. Not yet, he said. Some things have to wait for the right silence. Simone smiled sadly. I get that. A stranger's visit. Satisfied. A few weeks later, a man knocked on Elijah's door. He looked to be in his 30s, tall, nervous, wearing a worn denim jacket. Childbirth? Mr. Cwell? He asked. My name's Devon. My name's Devon. The air went still. For a second, Elijah thought he'd misheard. Clinging. The Devon, the man Serena had chosen, the man who'd fathered the child that broke everything, stood before him. Older, humbler, and visibly burdened. I'm sorry to come like this, Devon said. I wrote you before, but I needed to say it in person. Elijah didn't move. Why now? Devon swallowed hard. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. They stood there in silence for what felt like a long time. Finally, Elijah stepped aside. Come in. The conversation. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where Elijah had once built model trains with Jamal, where Serena had laughed over wine glasses, where truth had finally burned everything down. Devon clasped his hands together. I ruined everything. I know that. I thought I loved her, but it was never love. It was escape. She was hurting, I was weak, and together we made something ugly. Elijah listened quietly. Devon's voice trembled. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I just wanted to look you in the eye and tell you that I became a better man because of the hell I went through, because of what I did to you. For a long time, Elijah didn't speak. He just looked at the younger man, saw the pain, the regret, the weariness that no youth could hide. Finally, he said, You know what forgiveness feels like, Devon? Devon shook his head. It feels like standing in the ashes of your own anger and realizing the fire doesn't burn you anymore. Devon's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve that. Elijah nodded. Maybe not, but neither did I deserve the pain. Life doesn't deal in fairness. It deals in lessons. They sat quietly after that. Two men feels with one. Two men considered to the first, baseness that the liver lives in ways, one men. Both broken by the same woman, both trying to make peace with the same ghost. Behind leaving, Devon handed Elijah a photograph of a little girl with bright eyes and curly hair. Devon said softly, "And Serena's. Her name's Grace. She's 3 now." Elijah looked at the photo for a long time. "She looks like Simone did when she was little." Devon smiled faintly. "She's got her smile." When the door closed behind him, Elijah stood for a long while holding the photo. Then he whispered, "Grace, maybe that's what this was all for." 5. The reading. That night, Elijah finally opened Serena's letter. Elijah, misinformation. Unrestricted. With your reading this, it means time has done what apologies couldn't. I know you never needed my words, but I needed to write them. Thank you for raising our children with strength. Thank you for being the better soul when I was lost. Dismissing her Grace because that's what you gave me, even when I didn't deserve it. Every time I look at her, I remember that love, once real, never truly dies. It just changes form. Maybe in another life we'll find our way back to each other, whole, honest, unbroken. Until then, I'll keep you in my prayers. Serena. The letter trembled in his hands. Protection. He didn't cry. He'd cried enough for a lifetime. He simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Goodbye." The speech. Months later, Elijah was invited to speak at a leadership conference in Atlanta. The event was called Rebuilding After the Fall, and they wanted him to close the session. He stood before a crowd of hundreds young entrepreneurs, community leaders, survivors. The lights were bright. The room was hushed. He began with his story, not the details of betrayal, but the essence of it, the way pain strips you down to your core, and how forgiveness rebuilds you brick by brick. People think forgiveness is for the weak, he said, his voice steady. But it takes more strength to let go than it does to hold on. Because when you forgive, you stop living in someone else's shadow. You start building your own light. Roofing. Where the room erupted in applause. A few people wiped tears from their eyes. And for the first time, Elijah didn't feel like a man who had lost. He felt like a man who had finally won. The call. A few days later, Elijah received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Cwell," a soft female voice said. "Yes, this is Serena's sister Caroline. I wanted you to know that Serena's been in the hospital. Nothing serious, pneumonia mostly, but she asked about you." Elijah's heart stirred. "She's all right? She's stable now. She just wanted you to know that she's been following Grandpa's diaries. She said it gave her peace." Elijah closed his eyes. "Tell her, I'm grateful she's finding her way." Caroline paused. "She said she forgives herself because you taught her how." Went quiet, and that was enough. 8. Grace. A year later, on a soft spring morning, Elijah received another letter, this one from Devon. Inside was a photograph of Grace, now 4 years old, holding a crayon drawing of a family, a man, a woman, 2 kids, and a dog. On the back, Devon had written, "She calls you Grandpa Elijah. Serena tells her stories about you, about the man who taught her what real love looks like." Elijah sat on his porch, staring at the photo, the morning light glinting off his reading glasses. A slow smile crept across his face. "Grandpa Elijah," he murmured. Guess that name stuck. He posted the story on his blog that evening. Sometimes the family you heal isn't the one you started with. It's the one your forgiveness creates. It viral within hours. Thousands shared it. The comments were full of people saying they'd finally made peace with someone they'd hated for years. As he watched the stars over the quiet Georgia sky, Elijah realized his legacy wasn't his business, or his wealth, or even his story. It was the ripple of kindness his pain had created. 9. The porch conversation. Submerged again that weekend. She found her father sitting on the porch, notebook in hand, humming softly to himself. "Writing another entry?" she asked. He smiled. "Just finishing one." She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, "do you ever wish things had gone differently?" He thought about it, really thought about it, then shook his head. "If they had, I wouldn't be the man I am now, and you wouldn't be the woman you've become. Simmons, the storm you survive is the blessing." Simone nodded, eyes glistening. "You're right." They sat in silence, listening to the cicadas. The air smelled of honeysuckle and summer rain. 10. The legacy. Grandpa's Diaries reached 1 million followers. Publishers began calling. A documentary crew even visited, filming his story for a series on forgiveness and human resilience. But Elijah didn't care about fame. He cared about impact, about reaching that one person sitting alone in the dark, wondering if their life was still worth rebuilding. Every post ended with the same line: "If you're still breathing, you still have time to make peace." And people believed him, because his voice carried the weight of someone who had lived every word. 11. Epilogue. The quiet sunrise. Listening years later, on a golden morning in late May, Elijah Cwell sat on his porch for the last time. Gambling lay open on his lap, filled with the final entry he'd ever write. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering without bitterness. It's loving yourself enough to stop reliving the pain. It's saying, "This happened," and still choosing to smile. If my story reaches you, let it remind you that no ending is final, not even heartbreak. He closed the notebook, sipped his coffee, and looked toward the horizon as the first light broke over the trees. The wind whispered through the magnolias. Somewhere in the distance, a little girl laughed. He smiled. And for Elijah Cwell, Grandpa Elijah, that was enough. The greatest revenge is not hate, it's peace. Grandpa's Diaries, Chapter 6, The Legacy of Forgiveness.